Hello, music lovers of the world. Welcome to another episode 76 of What Makes This Song Special. Thanks so much for tuning in. Apologies for the lack of episodes the last couple of weeks. I did something a wee bit different last week. If you didn't see it, you can go back in the feed and see my supergroup. I had a wee debate about who I would put in my supergroup. What musicians I would put in a super band, essentially. And I'm still waiting for lots of comments and debates in the section underneath. So, yeah, if you can go back and look at that one, that would be greatly appreciated. Hopefully you enjoy it. This week we're back to the usual format, a little story that I'm taken back to when I hear a special song in my life. This week's special song is, of course, Chris Isaak, Wicked Game, unbelievable track. As always, all the tracks are unbelievable because they're special in some profound way to me. And then I'll do a wee, as always, a wee kind of takedown of the song, a little bit about the singer, and I'll follow up with a part 2 of my cover version of said song. So this week's, it isn't really a big memorable story as such. I like to think that some weeks I give you some really funny stories and sometimes kind of sad stories and things. This one's kind of just something that I'm taken back to when I hear today's song. That's what it's all about, I suppose. It was the beginning of 1990 and I would have been about 8 years old. We were sort of between houses at the time and we've just moved into this rented apartment on Alexander Avenue in a little village called Eaglesome in the south side of Glasgow. I always remember the night we moved in, we had a Chinese takeaway, which was quite a kind of rare occurrence in our house. And when my younger brothers went to bed, me and my mum sat up and watched the Karate Kid movie for the very first time, which was just incredible. I'd never seen it before, and it was just such a treat getting to stay up late and watch a movie while my brothers were sleeping. Being the oldest, I got to do those things sometimes. And the Karate Kid movies, there's a whole other, we could go into detail on those great movies. But yeah, I was mesmerised by that film, and I suppose that's probably where my kind of love of martial arts was born. Something that became a huge part of my life at various stages over the years. But anyway, we'd moved into this rented apartment, and I think a lot of our possessions at the time were in storage or at various family members' houses and things because we were moving back and forward to and from Italy frequently, whilst mum and dad were trying to find work and stuff like that. So we only stayed in this flat this apartment. A flat's a very kind of, I think it's quite a Scottish term, maybe a British term, but for anybody not watching from Britain, I know there's a lot of people watch from the US and a lot of people recently from Brazil. Thank you very much for watching from Brazil. I was looking at this analytics and a lot of Brazilians watching, so that's wonderful. Anyway, we only stayed in this apartment for a few months before moving to Italy again for the 1990 World Cup, which I did an episode on. There was a special song in that episode as well. But there weren't many things in the house, but I always remember that there was this Echo 12-string acoustic guitar. EKO was the name, the make, Echo. And it was my dad's guitar. It seemed to always be everywhere we went, even when we lost things, and that guitar was always there. It's still mum and dad's house to this day. I think it's got like 3 strings on it. He got it when he was about 18 or 19 years old and brought it to Scotland with him when he first moved here from Italy. I don't ever remember it having the 12 strings on it. In fact, I don't think I even remember it ever having 6 strings on it very often. But me and my brothers and my cousin Peter would all take turns at trying to play something on this guitar when we were younger. It was definitely this object of allure. And this was long before the days of YouTube where you could, jump on to a wee lesson where somebody would play some basics and show you what to do. We didn't even really know how to hold it properly. But I managed to get a few notes out of it here and there. I could always sort of hear melodies and then work out how to play them. I suppose that was an early sort of an early, what's the word, way of me sort of realising that I had a bit of a musical ear, I suppose. But yeah, I used to try and play these little melodies on it from different songs and bands that I was into at the time. I didn't even realise that there was a thing called a chord, or that you could strum a guitar at that point. It was that never really existed in my mind until a couple of years later. But that was where my songwriting journey began, because me and my big cousin Peter and my wee brothers wrote this song called Rock Steady on that guitar. A song about getting into a fight with a punk in the street and beating him up. We thought we were really cool for coming up with these lyrics. It was definitely influenced by Out to Get Me by Guns N' Roses when I look back. But we genuinely believed we'd kind of written this big hit. And then just as we were writing or finishing this masterpiece, my mum came in and told us that we were going out shopping. And we were, of course, devastated at this news. Did she not realise that we'd just penned a number one hit, We needed time to finish the lyrics, write a guitar solo, maybe a middle eight. But no, we were heading out. So we jumped into the car with Mum and Dad, and we headed to this place that sold sort of consumer electronic supplies. I think it was like a Dixon's or a Curry's or one of those types of shops that they existed back in the day. I think Curry's maybe still does exist in the UK, but I don't think Dixon's does anymore. But anyway, one of those types of shops. They sold TVs, hi-fis, washing machines, fridge freezers, that sort of place. And I always loved going to those shops as a kid, because when my mum and dad were in looking at whatever they were in for, I'd get to wander around and look at fancy televisions and cassette players. But they even at that point had, things that I hadn't seen in real life yet. They had fairly new things called CD players, which was a bit of a phenomenon. And they had computers, the first computers that you could play games on, the Atari ST, the Commodore 64, Amstrad Spectrums. This was so exciting, and getting to see these things in real life, it was amazing. We'd seen them in like magazines and things like that, but we hadn't really seen them in real life at this point. And it was the advent of a new era. We didn't really appreciate. I don't think we really appreciated what we were witnessing unfold before our eyes when it came to that type of technology. But just very exciting. And so I'm wandering about this big store, and they had this incredible Sony hi-fi right down kind of the middle of this aisle. I think it must have been their most expensive one. It was the showpiece. And the sound coming from this thing was unbelievable. And there was this song playing on repeat the whole time we were in the shop, this one song on repeat. And the sheer sonic brilliance of it was just captivating me in the most profound way. I could hear every note of the guitar playing with this amazing reverb effect on it and delay. And I remember just standing there for ages in complete amazement at the sound quality of the song, and also from that hi-fi, and wondering what our song Rocksteady would sound like coming out of that hi-fi. I dread to think. But the song that played on repeat that day, of course, was today's song, Wicked Game by Chris Isaak. A song that's so timeless in its production that it still sounds as absolutely relevant today as it did over 30 years ago when it came out. It's a masterpiece. And one that takes me back to that day, and I suppose not just that day, because it's not that memorable a day, other than we penned our first song. But that time in my life when I was a little kid, full of these infinite crazy dreams about what I was going to achieve in life. I really, really believed that I was going to be like a professional footballer who also had a black belt in karate and who toured with a famous rock band. Realistic dreams, why not, eh? That's what I love about, kids just dream, and there's no limit on that at all. There's no ceiling on that dream. It's just like, yeah, I can do all of that, which is wonderful. So as I said, not a hugely remarkable story, but that's why the song's special to me. That's what it takes me back to. When I hear the song, I always think of that day and that kind of time in my life. Why is it special to you? What does it take you back to? Leave a comment. I always get lots of nice comments in the videos about the song, or about maybe my vocal performance on the cover, which is really nice to hear. But I rarely get comments about, from stories from people. Why? What does that song remind you of? What is it? Is it a special song to you? What part of your life does it take you to? Why is it a part of the soundtrack to your life? If it is part of the soundtrack to your life? I'll talk a wee bit about today's song. I always give you a wee bit of an overview of the song. Wicked Game is, of course, a song by American singer-songwriter Chris Isaak. It was released in 1989 and it featured on the album Heart-Shaped World. It was used in a 1990 David Lynch film, Wild at Heart, and an Atlanta radio DJ who loved David Lynch movies basically just started playing the song, and it quickly became a huge hit, reaching top 10 positions in charts all over the world. I suppose that's the power that radio DJs had that back then. Nowadays, radio DJs are sort of just told what to play by by the powers that be and the record companies above. But back then, like there was a lot of scope for radio DJs to actually play songs that they liked, or they maybe heard a song from an unsigned band and started to play it, and that is often how unsigned bands became signed bands and famous bands. Sadly, that's not so much how it is now, but that is how the song became so big. I'm not saying, of course, that Chris Isaak was an unsigned artist at the time. He wasn't. It was, I think it was his second or third album that the song's from. But yeah, it's how the song became a huge hit. And on the surface, the song, it seems like the song is this tragic love tale, but it's really about falling for someone who you know isn't right for you. Isaak actually said in an interview that the song was inspired by a telephone call from a woman seeking to arrange a casual affair with him. And it's about what happens when you have a strong attraction to people that really aren't necessarily very good for you. So that's what the song's about. During the recording sessions for the track, the band came up with numerous different versions and arrangements of the song, which actually frightens me, because one of the greatest things about the song is, I think, the production of it. And that's not to understate how good the song is, but I think the production of a song can quite often just be a sort of a byproduct of just a really good arrangement and a really good bunch of musicians and stuff, whereas the production in this song is, I would say, as if not more important than the song itself. The production's so incredible. It just takes you on this, like, as I said earlier, on this sonic journey. It's so sort of ethereal and mesmerising. It's just amazing. So yeah, I don't want to think about what it might have been like with the other 10 versions that the band came up with. James Calvin Wilsey wrote and played that distinctive shimmering guitar lead using the Fender Stratocaster's vibrato arm, also known as a tremolo arm, but there's a whole debate about whether it actually tremolos or not, which is for another time. But and the bass line and the drums were sampled from previous recordings of the song and then looped into the bed for Isaac's sort of haunting, aching vocals and the guitars to lie on top of. It is just, as I said before, a masterpiece. It really is an amazing song. A vocal coach's perspective on the singer's voice, as always. Chris Isaak's voice is so recognisable, but it probably sounded like it was from another time, even when when he was at his peak in the late 80s and early 90s. It's got a kind of muted, low laryngeal, low larynx, almost Elvis tone going on, with a sort of bluesiness that he's able to play with in certain songs and in certain phrases. A sort of bluesy crooner, if you like, in a way. He has this very distinctive little the sound. He's got this little quirk as well where he sort of flips from chest to head voice a little abruptly, but not quite enough for it to be thought of as a break. It's definitely an intentional thing that he does as part of his sound. It's like a little break from chest to head voice, but it sounds a little bit clunky at times, but it's, as I said, it's definitely intentional, and it gives him this little bit of individuality and a character that makes his style really interesting. So a really cool voice and an insanely good song. So there we go. A short episode this week, but that was my thoughts on Chris Isaak Wicked Game. That's what it takes me back to. Click here or here in the next 30 seconds or so for my version of Wicked Game. It'll be very different. It won't have all those shimmering guitars, so I'm going to do it on the piano, but a wee bit different to the original. Hopefully you enjoy it. Please tune in, hit the subscribe button. It means the world to me when people hit like or even put an emoji in the comments. It really helps all the kind of algorithms and all the nonsense to kind of push me into the YouTube stardom that I'm desperate to have. And come back next week for another song and another story. And thank you so much for tuning in.